Why didn't the Cowboys offer a contract to Odell Beckham Jr.? And do the Cowboys even need him going forward? All that and more this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys. Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for tuning in. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to start our second podcast that's just about the art of podcasting called Locked On Podcast Cowboys.
I like that. Well,
so we're Locked On Podcast, but we are Cowboys that are Locked On.
Listen, I have not had enough coffee yet today. It's been a busy morning. All right, we've got a busy show for you today. We're going to talk a little bit about Odell Beckham, and then we're going to get to some mailbag questions. Yeah. Let's start with some Beckham news. The Cowboys had him on a visit on Monday and Tuesday. Seemed like the visit went well. Mike McCarthy said it was really enjoyable. They had a lot of time to chat about football and non-football related things. But the Cowboys did not offer him a contract, according to Jane Slater. And they are a little bit less optimistic that a deal gets done. 10,000-foot view here, Landon. What do you think of this kind of 2-day saga that went on between the Cowboys and Odell?
Well, I think the most interesting part of the saga that honestly has the most impact on this was not about the visit or not about the pictures of Odell going to the Mavs game, or any of that stuff. To me, the thing that was the most eye-opening and enlightening was the revelations that we heard from the Josina Andersons of the world and like of exactly what teams were thinking about the health of Odell Beckham.
Yeah.
To me, I think, and what's also interesting too, is that it seems like now that, the visit is over and it seems like the temperature of this whole situation has cooled quite a bit. There's a lot of kind of retroactive, recursive folks that are suggesting that the Cowboys are trying to pretend to themselves that they don't need Odell Beckham Jr. The thing that's changed here, guys, is that the odds of him, playing this season at a high level, just based on what we're hearing on, updated information on his medical, makes it sound like this guy is not playing football this year. Or if he is playing football this year, he won't start playing football until we're in the playoffs. Josina Anderson basically implied, hey, this was an 11-month injury last year. 11 months for this year would be another, few weeks, at least 3 weeks, I think is what she said. So to me, that changed the angles of everything, right? Like my interest in Odell Beckham Jr. is for this year. And even for this year, I had concerns about how quickly he could get into our building, how quickly he could get into the system, and would he disrupt whatever chemistry the Cowboys currently have on offense while trying to kind of force feed him in. This makes all the angles even worse. Like if he's having to come in even later, he hasn't had a supervised rehab process. He's trying to vie for a multi-year deal when we're not even sure he's going to be playing this year. I don't know. This is not the same deal that we were excited about going into this situation. And I think that's why a lot of us are kind of changing our tunes, is because this is not what we were expecting to get out of Odell Beckham.
Couple things. It's always really easy to tell on social media who's getting their information from who, right? Because I saw a tweet yesterday, like the Cowboys are 24th in wide receiver production. They absolutely need a player like okay. That's one thing. It's to me, it's been concerning over the last month that we haven't seen the usual hype video of Odell working out, right? Like you see it all the time. Like, oh, look at him running in sand. Look at him changing directions. Look at this awesome catch. We haven't
or even if you do see him, even if you do see the videos, because I do think he has some videos out. None of it is like, yeah, what you're describing, changing direction, exploding off that foot. It's like him lifting weights and like not doing anything on the knee that is like showing any kind of progress. It just is basically kind of generally suggesting that he is staying in shape, which that's not what we're looking for.
No,
we're looking
remember, Michael Gallup was doing that stuff in July and August, and look how long it took him to even get back on the field and then start to look like his usual self. So I think that's just what's going on here. He's not running. He's not cutting. He's probably still 2 months away, to be nice, more likely 3. And I think the Cowboys are still interested, but I think they're less interested if he's not going to help out this year.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the whole deal is that this was all prompted by Odell Beckham deciding that he wanted to kind of open bidding on his situation. And,
it's week 14, Landon. We're getting into crunch time, right?
Well, there was some kind of, implication that he was cleared. And I think that like later on, I did see someone like rightfully, and I wish I could remember who it was, rightfully go, there's a difference between being cleared, and being cleared for football activities, and I think that that's where we are, is that, he's cleared to walk around without a brace, but
I think he's cleared to start working out, if I had to guess.
Maybe, but that's still, I mean, he's still a ways away from playing football. Yeah, it's this,
by the way, just to be clear, I kind of want Dallas to still sign him.
I don't have an issue. Yeah, I don't have an issue with it. Like, I think I don't have an issue with them signing him. I think it's, but I'm not going to go give him a bunch of money. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like especially if he's not willing to, work out with us. I think that you're hoping that if you're going to sign a deal here, that you're going to get a serious discount for next year. Like, and you're going to be getting a good deal on the contract. I'm not willing to give Odell Beckham, as it currently stands, $20 million a year or whatever it is. No. Like, this needs to be a prove-it deal that he can come in here. We'll give you some benefit to work out with our medical staff for the rest of the year. You give us some benefit of, lessening some guarantees and then giving us a cheap contract next year. I'm interested in that, but I think we should all kind of temper our expectations as far as what Odell Beckham potentially would even be providing for the Cowboys if he even were to sign to the Cowboys.
And I'm still not opposed to the Cowboys giving him a kind of phony 3-year deal, like where one of the years is this year, basically just to get him in the building, getting practice.
Like avoidable stuff.
And then the next 2 years are, guaranteed money that's not fully guaranteed. And I don't say that just because he and I share the same agent, which I saw somebody point out on Twitter before. I think he would be a good fit in this team. It's just you can't expect him to play at all this year.
Yeah, I think it's just a that's, I think, what's the biggest news about this week is that the angles of what we should expect from Odell Beckham has changed, and I think that really changes the interest level as far as I'm concerned.
There are some people wondering on Twitter if the Cowboys even really need him with the emergence of a certain receiver on this team. We're going to get to that in just a second, but wanted to let you know that this podcast is sponsored by Turo. Turo is the world's largest car sharing marketplace. Landon actually just used them a couple weeks ago. Absolutely love the experience. With Turo, you can book any car that you want, wherever you want it, from a community of local hosts. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. You can book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip, get a classic or luxury car for a special event, birthday, or holiday, or if you just need to find an affordable economy car. If you're on a budget and just need to get from A to B, many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive forever at Turo.com. All right, Landon, let's talk a little bit about CeeDee Lamb, who's performed pretty well over the last couple of weeks. I actually have 2 questions. This first one's from Goran. He wants to know, the term number 1 receiver is pretty silly and overused by fans. Yes, that's true. But is it fair to say that CeeDee Lamb has officially taken that next step into elite status? And the second question is a really good one. Is this kind of third-year breakout by Odell? This is a question from Kyle, by the way. Third-year breakout by CeeDee. Does it remind you of when Dez broke out in 2012? If so, who was the more dominant player?
They're very different players.
They are very different.
Well, first of all, to answer the first question, I mean, elite is such a nebulous term. It's difficult to kind of place people here or there, especially when they're on the fringes. I think there obviously are some players that are clearly elite, and they're, when you're talking about someone like CeeDee Lamb, who is an ascending player, right? It's difficult to kind of figure out when they've crossed this imaginary threshold of elite. Yeah. But I would say that at this point, he is becoming an extremely dangerous receiver that, obviously is going to be the main focus of defensive game plans. I think that that's, to me, the minimum requirement for a wide receiver one, right, is a wide receiver that the defensive coordinator's number one focus on trying to stop, right? Yeah. I think what's made him elite, or has made the case for being elite, is what he's done with the football once he's gotten it in his hands. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think that the targeting, the focus on the offense is what makes him the number one wide receiver. What he's doing with the football once he has it, that's what's making him elite. And I think that that's really been the missing element from his game as it translated from the player that he was at OU to now, right? Yep. And in college, he was the elite of the elite with the ball in his hands after the catch. Like, he was just impossible. I mean, I keep thinking back to that Texas game. Wasn't it the Texas game where I'm pretty sure he broke at least one tackle?
They had like 4 guys wrapped right around him. Yep.
And I think that's what we're starting to see now. We're seeing him being slung to the ground and him slinking his way back up off the ground, and we see him run through arm tackles. We just see him physically dominating folks, and I think that's. I gotta say, like, he's always been a very lanky, kind of skinny looking dude. I saw him post game yesterday. He's just rocked up now. Yeah. Like, he just looks physically different than he did in previous years. So. I think that's really, that kind of lanky, what's the word they used in the replacements that he had, like wiry. He used to be like a very wiry player, right? Yep. And now he's rocked up. And I think that's helped with that element of his game. I think that what we're seeing is that as he starts to bring that element back up to where it was in college into the NFL, that he is going to start entering into that elite conversation, because he's just gonna be so dangerous with the ball in his hand.
I got some stats for you. Are you ready? Yeah, I actually did some work pre-show. All right. According to Pro Football Focus, he is the 4th highest graded receiver since week 3. The players ahead of him, I believe, are Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, and Justin Jefferson.
Those 3 guys are those 3 are the 3 clear elite wide receivers in the NFL. So the fact that he's in that group is a good sign.
Next one. Most games with at least 50 or receiving yards. I feel like 50 is a good amount, right? If you get to that, at least you're helping your team in some way. The only player in the NFL to have more yards per or 50-yard performances than him, Stephon Diggs at 11. CeeDee has 10. So every week you can count on CeeDee to have some kind of impact in the offense. And as much as I love Amari Cooper, and I know you do as well, that was one of the flaws that Amari had last year through his Cowboy careers. He would have these monster games and then be 2 for 29 the next week. Just disappear. Just really hasn't happened with CeeDee.
Mm-hmm. And that's consistently week to week. That's a huge thing, right? And I like that 50-yard marker, because that shows you, hey, at the very minimum, he's getting this amount, which is, 100 yards is obviously unrealistic, but your number one wide receiver should be generating at least 50 yards receiving yards every game.
And he actually leads the NFL in most 70 or more yards this season. But 50 is, 10 out of 12 games or 10 out of 13 games to have at least 50 yards, good number. We know Dez had a lot of those games where, it's 3 for 31, and you just wonder, why didn't they get him more involved? One more. Since Dak has come back into the lineup since week 7, he's averaging 10.2 yards per target. And I can't even begin to explain to you how ridiculously efficient that is. Dez in his career had one season where he averaged over 10 yards per target. I think Jerry Rice had 1 year in his career where he averaged over 10 yards per target. Dak and CeeDee are just so stinking efficient together. It's incredible. And he's on pace, even despite having Cooper Rush early in the year and having a poor week 1 game. He's on pace to have 1,400 yards and close to double-digit touchdowns this year. He has absolutely crossed over to that elite threshold.
I really want to point out this distinction between what you just said. That's 10 yards per target, not per reception, guys, per target, meaning every single time he gets targeted or a throw gets thrown, he's averaging 10 yards. So that includes all the incompletions that he's had, any kind of negative play that didn't work out. Even with all of that added in, he's still averaging 10 yards a target. That's an incredibly efficient target.
I just to double check, Jerry Rice had 1 year in his career where he averaged 10 yards a target. It was in 1995, and that was the season he had 1,900 yards. 1 year for Jerry Rice at it. So what CeeDee's done the last 2 months of the season is unprecedented. And I know that we get frustrated sometimes because him and Dak read things a different way, or he might have a drop here and there, but it doesn't really matter that much when you are that efficient. I think he's been incredible.
I think that's what we kind of need to readjust. And I've been guilty of this as well too, is that we need to live with these interceptions because honestly, like the rest of these games is what the result is, right? Dak is going to be aggressive with CeeDee. We want to kind of adjust that at certain times, but I think part of that is something that we don't want to touch because it is still producing this level of efficiency with their number one target, which is something you don't want to get rid of.
Back to the kind of Dez versus CeeDee thing. What's funny is I actually think both of these receivers got paired up with the right quarterbacks, because I don't think Dak would have been as good with prime Dez, because Dez wasn't really a route runner. You needed to put the ball into certain spots and let him go out physical defensive backs. And that's just not really Dak's game. He likes to see guys open and let them make plays after catch. And Romo was the same way. Romo was better off at throwing the ball into certain spots and letting receivers go and make plays. It just ended up working out nicely that Dak and CeeDee are paired together, and Dez and Romo were paired together for most of their careers.
I mean, if we're just going to kind of 10,000 foot view compare these guys, I think that if just to put them in very, very reduced buckets, CeeDee is a much more skilled receiver than Dez was, but Dez is a much more physical specimen than most wide receivers
because he's
ever.
20 pounds heavier than CeeDee, at least.
Yeah, and explosive in a way that was hard to measure. I mean, I think he ran like a 1.4 10-yard split. Which is actually what CeeDee runs as well. I think a 1.49. I think they actually run very similar 10-yard splits, but the difference is that Dez had like 15 or 20 pounds on CeeDee.
Well, I think CeeDee at the combine was 189.
Yeah,
and Dez at his pro day was 224,
and not in his best shape, honestly.
No, not with somebody else's shoes. I mean, that's the difference. But at the same time, for CeeDee, like in this Kellen Moore offense, he needs to be able to play all these different roles. And you're seeing him last week, like they're using him in motion and they're using him out wide and in the slot. And I actually told my uncle who I was watching the game with, I'm like, I bet you CeeDee runs like 7 miles throughout the course of a game by all the shifting and all the different stuff he has to do. That was never a strength of Dez. Dez was better in so many other areas, but in this offense, the Cowboys kind of need that guy that can play all over the field.
Yeah, and that was honestly part of the downfall with Dez, is that we couldn't move him around the way you wanted him to. So it made it easier for him to be kind of double teamed. And then, that made it a lot more difficult to kind of get him the ball when you wanted him to make the play. I think it's easier to get CeeDee Lamb a solid target because of his ability to play all the different positions and because of that scheme him open.
This podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. They've got it all at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, and we know that you do because you're listening to one right now, you can find those as well on BetOnline. It's always the fastest and easiest way to get in your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Landon, one more question. This one from Adam. He wants to know, at what point can Cowboy fans put their guard down and accept that this team can make a playoff run? 2014, 2016, last year all come to mind when I think how far this team can go.
You can't trust until it's done. Like I don't know. I wouldn't tell anybody to put their guard down at this point. I have belief that this is a much better prepared team to have a deep playoff run than last year's team, than some of the other teams, simply because I think that they play with a physical nature that those other teams didn't necessarily play with. I think the defense may be a little bit better than what we had been playing with at different points. I think the way that the team is trending in general is kind of more in the direction, obviously, of what you're looking for. But I certainly don't have anything that like I can tell you or that the team can do that can tell you that this is going to be a different result in the playoffs this year. I think the only thing that can make you feel better about that is it happening. Because look, the Cowboys have had a really good season this year. Unless something drastic changes, which I mean, we are all hoping it does, it still feels like no matter what happens these last few games, that the Cowboys are likely to end up playing Tampa Bay to play in the first round of the playoffs. So they aren't going to get, the easy road that I think some people hoped for. But honestly, I keep saying this, and I've been saying this for years, like, the easy road doesn't help you in the playoffs, I don't think. I mean, I understand the stats. I understand
sometimes it helps you get through a round or two, right?
Yeah, but I think that I think if you want to get to the Super Bowl and win, you've got to be battle tested. You can't be surprised when you play the best team in football next week, because that could be every week that you play the best team in football until you get to the Super Bowl, right? So you've got to be, you can't be, it's like I said, man, you can't be afraid to slay any of these dragons. You got to face them all head on. So I don't have anything to make any of us sleep better at night up until playoff time. It's just going to be the wait to get there. And the Cowboys obviously have a lot of work to do to get there. None of this is sealed yet. But I think the only way that any of us are going to feel better about this team and their playoff chances is to see them do it. And I think that's what we're all waiting to see.
Do you think this team is better suited to make a run than it was at this time last year?
I do. I mean, I think that they're like I mentioned, I think that they're more physical. I think that they're a better defense than they were last year on balance, just in balance, like overall. And I think that, I don't know that the offensive line was as highly revered as it was last year, but I think that what we could have at offensive line by the time the playoffs roll around could be a much, much better crew than that was last year. I just think that they're much more physical. They play a brand of football on the line of scrimmage that is plays well in the playoffs. I think I'm obviously still hesitant. I still want to see, how Tyron Smith does. I want to see how they react to having McGovern or Smith inside at guard. I'm assuming it's Smith. And then how that all plays out. But I think better about this team just because of the way they're playing football. I think by the time this happened last year, it felt like we were limping into the end of the season. The offense was sputtering in a way that it shouldn't have been. Despite all the pieces that we had on it, it just felt like things were discombobulated. Right now, it feels like the offense is clicking in a serious way, and that the only thing that can really stop them is themselves at times. So I feel a little bit more confident about the trajectory of where this team is this year than I did last year.
I also think the NFC is just weaker. I mean,
that's another part of it too. Yeah,
you look at the teams that were in the playoffs last year, other than Philadelphia. Philadelphia is 10 times better than they were last year. Like, Tampa's nowhere near as good. Now they could still end up beating Dallas in round one, but there's no Rams. Minnesota certainly looks like a lesser version of Green Bay from last year. The 49ers are going to be without their quarterback, at least for the first couple rounds of the playoffs. You've got Seattle, who is a pretty young team. It's the Giants. It's Washington. I mean, I think the Cowboys team at the very worst is similar to last year. They might have a harder route because they have to go on the road, but the competition actually might be easier than what they had to face last year.
Listen, them having to play San Francisco in round one was just a nightmare scenario for them. So they were just a bad matchup for the Cowboys. And honestly, it exposed a lot of the, issues that were going to be exposed probably later in the playoffs, even if they had advanced through round one. It's that lack of kind of physicality that it felt like the Cowboys had a defense at times, the inability to kind of find consistency on offense. those are not as big issues at times as far as execution with plays. Now, obviously, the Cowboys still have penalty problems that they need to fix, but I think for the most part, you see a lot more consistency. They have a lot more that they can rely on to be good plays. I think that's the real things that they didn't. I felt like an offense last year at the end of the year, they didn't have anything that they could rely on to consistently be a winner, right? No matter who they were playing. They did a lot of kind of adjusting per opponent, which is, I think, a good plan, but they didn't have like the one or two plays that they could consistently rely on when things weren't going well that at least could get them positive yardage. I think that the run game, specifically on the right side of that offensive line, is something that they can rely on. It's something that they can do that, I think, against anybody, maybe even San Francisco's defense. And I think that will be something that will be the cornerstone, the kind of power, not power run game, but like bullying run game will be something that they can build as a cornerstone of this offense that they can work everything else off of.
Next month is going to be really interesting. They've got some, I don't want to say cakewalk games because nothing's a cakewalk in the NFL, but it's how do you not take the cheese in this game like against the Texans at home, coming off a huge win. Then you play Jacksonville, who's really struggled and gotten blown out by a couple teams before you play the Eagles. Like, I want to see them continue to just dominate these teams, do what you're supposed to do, and not have a letdown. Like, don't go into the fourth quarter all of a sudden down 7 points to Houston. Like, put these teams away. And it'll kind of, I think that those will be good signs that the Cowboys are making progress and they're not maybe the same team they were last year.
I mean, I would just add in, like if you're looking for positive signs that things are better, think about the Rams game earlier this year. I understand the Rams are who they are now, but the Rams were still, relatively healthy and coming off a Super Bowl win when we played them. Those are the kind of games the Cowboys used to lose all the time, right? Like a tough
Sean
opponent
McVay,
on the road.
you're playing
Sean McVay.
Yeah. On the road.
Those are the kind of things. And then the Colts game, right? Like that. I mean, Marcus, you more than anybody else, I think, can admit, like how much during that game were you saying, not this again? No, don't do this again.
Victor was pretty tight late in the third quarter of that game.
But that game, but they pulled it out. And that's, I think, the difference this year and some of these other years is that they have a level of resiliency. They have a level of talent that they didn't necessarily have, that when they do turn it on, they're as tough as any team in football to stop.
Yeah. I was talking to my brother this week about that Colts game. And I told him at the time, I said, once the Cowboys got up a touchdown, you just knew it was over.
Yeah.
You just did. And I think that's the different part of this team outside of the Green Bay game. Just going to forget that game happened for a little bit. It just feels like once the Cowboys get that touchdown lead, these games, they're pretty good at putting these games away. I think the offense knows how to step on the opponent's throats, and the defense gets into a situation where, okay, now we can hunt. We can go do what we can do on that side of the ball. Cowboys are really good at closing out games this year. Like, they have not, again, outside of the Green Bay game, they have not let these teams really hang around a lot. And again, that's just a sign of a good team.
It's tough when you play a team that can run the football extremely well and that can rush the passer really well, because as soon as they get a lead, it's a double whammy. They're bleeding the clock, making you more desperate, forcing you to throw the football more, which is exactly what you don't want to do against Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, Dorrance Armstrong. The list goes on.
All right, that is it for today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All the same places that you would download the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Check us out over on YouTube. I think we're like 5 subscribers away from 6,000.
Come on, guys, get it.
A little push there. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. We've got the crossover show tomorrow, and then you and I are previewing Cowboys Texans on Friday. We'll see you guys then.